Good morning. My name is Kathy Warne, and it is my privilege to serve as your worship associate today. Today, we welcome Kai Marks to our pulpit to share her reflections about holy curiosity. With this idea in mind, let us begin with the words of the writer Annie Dillard. We are here to abet creation and to witness it, to notice each other's beautiful face and complex nature, so that creation need not play to an empty house. Come, let us worship together. Our worship leader today is Kai Marks, and I'm very excited to welcome her to the pulpit this morning. I've heard Kai speak many times, and I've always found her sermons both profound and somehow very stirring. Kai Marks is a writer, a teacher, and a spiritual director. She is an associate of the Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur, and she holds Masters of Arts in Writing and a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from the University of San Francisco. Kai is also a graduate of the Caroline Myss Education Institute programs in Archetypes and Mysticism and of the Disney Institute program for Excellence in Leadership. Before we hear her speak, I'd like to offer this prose reading in what I hope is the same spirit from Rainer Maria Rilke from his series, Letters to a Young Poet. Rilke wrote this series of letters when he was, partly when he was in rural France, and so try to imagine that landscape if you can. Here, where a mighty land is about me, here I feel that no human being can answer for you those questions and feelings which have a life of their own in the depth of your heart. For even the best use words wrongly when they want to give them the most delicate and almost inexpressible meaning. But for all that, I think that you cannot remain without a solution if you attach yourself to objects like those with which my eyes are now regaling themselves. If you attach yourself to nature, to the simple and small in her, which hardly anyone sees, but which can so unexpectedly turn into the great and the immeasurable. If you have this love for what is slight and try quite simply as a servant to win the confidence of what appears to you poor, then everything will become easier for you, more uniform and somehow more reconciling. Not perhaps in the understanding, which holds back in amazement, but in your innermost consciousness, watchfulness, and knowledge. You are so young. All beginning is so far in front of you, and I should like to beg you earnestly to have patience with all unsolved problems in your heart, and to try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms or books that are written in a foreign tongue. Do not search now for the answers, which cannot be given to you because you could not live them. That is the point, to live everything. Now you must live your problems. And perhaps gradually, without noticing it, you will live your way into the answer some distant day.
Good morning. Good morning. It is such a pleasure to be with you, and I want to say heartfelt thanks for having me this morning, for the gorgeous music, for Kathy being so phenomenally easy to work with and making this whole process such a joy. And thank you all for being here on a holiday weekend. You know, when you get invited as a guest speaker to join a congregation on a holiday weekend, you never know if you're going to be quite literally preaching to the choir. So it is really, really nice to come and see so many of you here in the sanctuary and on Zoom. It's, you know, it makes the whole thing a lot less lonely. So you must be curious. And, you know, when Reverend Laura invited me, I said, well, is there anything particular that you want me to do or that your congregation needs? And she said something about the theme being curiosity. And I said, well, I'll only do that if I can put the word holy in front of it, which she let me do. So I'm also grateful for that. You should know, before we get going here, I always feel compelled in UU circles to issue the disclaimer that I am profoundly theist. I just came that way. I didn't intend it, and it's never gone away. I've kept it. And I'm comfortable with God language. I understand that not everybody is, so feel free to substitute your own words and experience at any time. You might have seen, I don't know the extent to which the original blurb that I gave was posted, but this idea of holy curiosity, I think, has been with us since the beginning of time, but the expression is often credited to Albert Einstein, and I feel like, okay, in a UU congregation, he's probably safe to quote, right? People are going to get behind that. And what's even better is, as a scientist, he was describing that deep spiritual, intellectual drive to explore an understanding that transcends mere intellectual inquiry. And that's what I want to encourage us toward today. You know, I think as Unitarian Universalists, we have informational curiosity down. In fact, that's something I think that a lot of you use. It's probably a source of pride, and I'm sure you've heard the jokes that are out there about us, that we are the denomination that goes out and burns questions on people's lawns. That's kind of our thing. And that is all to the good And I think that holy curiosity transcends that. And so the goal here, one of many, I think, is to move from information to transformation. As I mentioned, my own holy curiosity as a child started very early, much to the chagrin of my atheist parents. And I thought if they didn't want me to be spiritual, my mother shouldn't have had Days of Our Lives on every day because the Hortons and the Bradys were Catholic. And I would take my old baby blankets and make a nun veil and go nunning around. And my family would say, "Where did we get you?" And I think the part they didn't say, but were thinking was, "And can we send you back?" And that curiosity never left. I continued to be a spiritual seeker. There were lots of things that influenced that. My father passed away when I was 7, and when you're 7 and you lose a parent, everybody likes to tell you where that parent has gone or not gone. And I couldn't help but notice as a child that everybody's answers were different. 2 of my father's sisters, in part in response to that tragedy, became Jehovah's Witnesses. And even as a young child, I wondered what kind of faith would drive someone to separate from their families all holidays, traditions, everything that they had ever known. And I became hell-bent after years of begging to go to Catholic school, and my mother would say, "No, no, no, that's not who we are." So when I was going to college and paying for it myself, of course, that's where I went, with the sisters, and later with the Jesuits. And then, at the turn of the century, found my way into Unitarian congregations and saw a woman in the pulpit for the first time. And I had lots of questions, like, "You can do that?" And at 26 years after first seeing Reverend Rachel Anderson, look where I turned up. So it's not such a bad thing. Holy curiosity is this thing that you live your way into. And I think more and more about that as somebody who works with children. And earlier this week, one of my 5th graders asked me, where did the abbreviation LBS for pounds come from? And I flashed back to my own 5th grade experience, where our teacher would have us once a week a curiosity corner, and you had to generate questions, and then she would select from those questions, and you had to research to find the answers. And I remembered that LBS was one of my questions, and I don't remember the answer that I found in the World Book Encyclopedia, but I remember that it was a question, and I watched the young man who asked me. He said, "Never mind, don't answer me, I'll Google it." And I thought about how Google is a verb now, and so much of the world just comes to us. And does that affect our curiosity? Does that affect our children's curiosity in the way that we see the world? But you know, it turns out my worry, as it often is both unfounded and premature, because this morning I met one of your young congregants, Stuart, and we struck up a conversation, and it turns out we both like the same movie that we've seen recently, which is The Sheep Detectives, which, by the way, very related to what we're doing here. A group of sheep, no spoilers, something happens to their shepherd, and they go on a quest to find out what, and it becomes a holy journey. So yes, even the sheep can engage in holy curiosity, and if the sheep can do it, I suspect we can too. I happen to be of the opinion, you don't have to share it, but spiritual maturity should deepen our wonder, not destroy it. And as we move from mere information to transformation, it takes practice. I would offer that, at least to me, I think it's a better life. I think it allows us to live a life that transcends the ordinary. Not, by the way, that there's anything wrong with the ordinary, just you have the chance to look up to live, so to speak, why not do that? And it is a way to transform ourselves and the world, which I've heard something about is your mission. So just in case you feel like living that mission out when you leave here and on into next week and the rest of your life, maybe there's something here that you can take with you. I want to put the word holy in front of curiosity because I think when we choose to live in a way that's holy with an H and we make holy choices, that it also makes us, and by extension, everybody else, more whole, W-H-O-L-E. So I think that's worth it. So how do you know? What is the difference between what I might think of as a pedestrian question, like why is the abbreviation for LBS pounds, into the bigger questions? Like one of my questions as a child, why did you make me this way? So I could have thought about, why was I born into this family? Why aren't they like me? But a question about why did you make me this way opens up the whole world. And I'm still living my way into that answer. So if you or somebody you know has ever asked the question, for what reason was I born? As if there's only one, by the way. But if you've asked a question, that's the type of question that qualifies for holy curiosity. Some people would define holy curiosity as what moves us from comfort to calling. So if you are somebody who's aware that you're being called towards something, whether you attribute that calling as something that is supernatural or not, but something that you feel driven to do, it's the holy curiosity that moves you. And the example that's often used for that, at least in Judeo-Christian context, is Abraham going to the promised land, right? Which is similar to what a lot of us go through. We get a calling, we get a sense that we should go do something, and we go do it, and it never turns out quite the way that we think, and we make mistakes along the way, but somehow, when we're following a calling, we still end up accompanied by something greater. At least that's my experience. Or sometimes you ask and you live your way through it. Like, I'm kind of a junkie for the New Testament, because I really love those stories. I get into the miracles and all those things, and I agree with comedian Lewis Black when he said that the New Testament is when God has a kid and goes to anger management. So it's kind of more fun. Mary is one of the ones who is also referenced often as having holy curiosity. There's various translations, but of the question, how shall this be when I have not been with a man, as the question she asks of the angel when visited. And that account could have gone so many different ways, by the way. And you notice she doesn't get the answers of the mechanics, right? No angel comes down and says, well, when a divine being and a human woman have a child and the following things, and this is, none of that. And thank goodness we didn't, because we would misinterpret that. But what she does do, which seems to be the same thing that lives its way out in us, is she asks the question, she leaves the question out there, and then she lives her way into it. And by the way, if you know the story, not a super easy story. Like, if that had been me and I was going to bear the Messiah and have to deal with the public shame of it not being married, and, because you really can't go into town and say, well, don't stone me, I was knocked up by an angel. It doesn't work in the same way, right? And then you'd think, okay, well, if I'm carrying the Messiah, at least you'll give me great conditions to give birth in, right? Not according to the account I've read, right? And then the second the child is born, they want to kill him, and you sort of know how the story unfolds from there. And as if that weren't enough, because I would have said, asked to carry the Messiah, one and done, right? But as the story goes, she had several more mortal children who probably were walking into walls, and she had to figure out how to raise them too. So you ask the question, and you live your way into it. I can give you an example from my own life. I don't know the extent to which it will resonate, but about a year and a half ago, I was serving as a head of school, loving the job, and very suddenly was removed from the job mid-year and if you're in education, mid-year, you're not going to work for a while. And that's never been true for me. I've had multiple jobs since I left home at 17. Never had a day when I didn't work. And this went on for 7 months. I would go to interviews, all kinds of things, think that things would happen, and they didn't happen. And so what I will often do, I think of it as kind of spiritual tinkering, but I kind of only get around to it when all my other stuff has failed me. And one morning, my Bible happened to fall open to the account of the widow and the oil, if you know it, in the Old Testament. And that right there was a curiosity to me because, as I mentioned, I'm not an Old Testament girl. I'm not into all the retribution and smiting and things like that go on. But in that story, it's a widow whose sons are about to be taken away for payment of debts, and all she has is a little bit of oil. And the prophet Elijah tells her, go get a bunch of containers and pour your oil into them. And she doesn't say, are you kidding me? I'm about to lose my children. You want me to get containers? If you know the story, she pours, the oil continues to come, and she has enough eventually that she reaches prosperity. And I remember reading that, and I think I might have even said out loud, I'm not sure, you'd have to ask my dog, but I remember the moment of saying, does that really work? And that's kind of what I do. I'll read something in sacred text, because it turns out for me it actually is kind of a good book. And then I'll think, does that work? And whether by accident or design, but you know by now which way I'm going to lean, one of the things that started to happen is I would go to the mailbox, these things that we don't get very often anymore, letters with stamps, and there would be things in there from people I hadn't heard from in years. I heard what happened to you. I don't have much. Here's $5. Day later, from someone else, here's a gift card. I don't shop at this store, but I thought you could use it. And this went on and on and on for months. The tiny little restaurant in my neighborhood that I like to go to, and every once in a while, just to get out of the house, I would go and I would get a cup of soup. And they knew my situation. Never once charged me more than $1 for anything I ordered until I worked again. And sometimes they would even put my favorite entree on the table, wrapped up for takeout, and say, in case you need it later. And so, in my experience, not unlike Kathy's reading, you ask a question, you live your way into it. You don't get the answers. I wasn't told when this was going to end. Didn't necessarily make the process easier, but I was so happy to be remembered by all these people that that's a gift I will treasure from that period of time. So I think it's a little bit like that. Holy curiosity in my mind is also different from what I think of as the psychic forensics that we do. Like, why did this person do this to me? Why do bad things happen to good people? How come? Those are valid questions. But if we're not mindful, they take us backwards. What holy curiosity does is say, okay, this happened. I may not like it. What are you calling me toward? Because no matter how much I loved that job, it was gone and I had a choice. I could try to figure out why it happened, but that wouldn't change where I was, or I could try my best to focus on what's next and have coffee with anybody who would show up. There's another definition of holy curiosity, worshiping in wonder, which sounds lovely, doesn't it? But what does that really mean? Well, I think it means, maybe quite simply, that we look up. One of the best things I ever heard as somebody who is, I am a champion worrier. I am anxious. I can out-anxious anybody. And it's a pity I heard this so late in my life, because it's recent, just a couple years ago, that somebody said, you know, worry is just using your faith in the opposite direction. I thought, wow. Right? It takes the same amount of energy to worry as it does to worship. And what happens if you turn that on its head? But I'll tell you, one of the things that inevitably happens is you're going to notice more. Gratitude comes more naturally. Your field of vision widens. So even if your circumstances don't change, you still win. A corollary to that, you may have heard this one too. Well, you can worry, but you could be curious. So I try that out every once in a while, especially when I'm feeling particularly worried. And I'll be honest, sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. Walt Disney, who came up with all kinds of things that influenced our world, said all of his ideas began with curiosity. So I think one of the reasons that I like this idea of holy curiosity, and I wanted to spend time with us on it this morning, is that one of the hallmarks of holy curiosity is that it gives us hope. And it gives us proof in a way that you can't prove that this holy system, this divinity and universe that we're all a part of, that the system works. That heaven in its own way, when we give what we have, whether that is a drop of oil, a little bit of kindness, eye contact with someone, heaven shows up like a matching grant and meets us halfway and says, okay, cookie, let's go. So when given that choice, I wouldn't want to live any other way. There's another piece to holy curiosity that involves empathy. And for those of us who work with children, I think this is an easier analogy. If any of you have ever known a child to do something you sort of wish they wouldn't, I don't know if any of you have had that experience. Maybe. And those of us who work with children, because we do and because that's our heart and we love children, when we're doing our job, we look at that child and we say, I wonder why. I wonder what they need. And we go at it that way. But somehow, and I can tell you I'm guilty of this too, when an adult does something I really wish they wouldn't, I am not always as quick to use the same strategies, but holy curiosity, if we remember to live at that altitude, can help deepen and enrich our relationships because it gives us a layer before we're tempted to judge people. So it is a way of life, simple but not easy, and requires practice. But you know that, because if it were easy to keep our hearts in a holy place, we wouldn't be singing songs about it when we come to church. It doesn't say that spiritual novices deepen in their wonder, though they do, but in spiritual maturity, our wonder deepens. I think anytime we can look at the smallest of things or look at each other with reverence and with awe, it brings us closer to our destiny. So in terms of how do you do it, questions are good. I'll leave the jury out on whether or not you burn them on people's lawns, but asking the right kind of question and then being willing to live your way into it and see what happens. I promise you, something will transform. I don't know what it is exactly, but I know that what we do here in church is bear witness to that experience for each other. The experience of faith lived, the experience of the choice to worship in wonder. And I don't know about you, but any time I've ever hit the high altitude spiritually or taken the high road when I didn't want to, I can look back across the tapestry of my life, and when I have done that, I've never once regretted it. Sermon on another day about the times when I haven't done that and the regrets I have. But if you really want regret insurance, practice this as a way to live. And then have days when you don't if you need a break, but when you come back to it, you'll appreciate it all the more. I think the other reason to look at holy curiosity, or another way to language it, is holy curiosity is what moves us from living our fate and going through the motions to living our destiny. Another hallmark is that we are always invited. And I love that. I love that we are given free will when it applies to me. I don't always love how everybody else chooses to use their free will, right? But I love that we're given that. That somehow heaven says, come on, do you want to give it a try? And if we make mistakes, heaven is still there. And that we're extended forgiveness with the hope that we extend that forgiveness and love to each other, knowing that all of us are trying to figure this out and trying to feel more whole and all one together in this journey that we're on. So, as you go out into the week, look up to live. Think about what it might mean to question faithfully and live your way into those questions. It never hurts to live a life of faith, hope, and awe, and reverence for all that is our life. And if you have days when you can't get there, reach out for somebody else. See what you can give to them, because often that's easier to do. And that'll remind you of the greater tapestry. It's part of this life that we all live together. And I promise you that when you do something, when you take that first step, you've set something in motion that never ends, that is good. And I don't know too many things in this life that you can do with a guaranteed good outcome, but I know anything done in love and good intention reaches somewhere, someone. Every thought we have is a prayer. Everything is heard. Nothing is wasted. We are so fortunate to be alive now. Hear over and over again, oh, the world and all its problems. Yes, but look at what you can do. It's not an accident that we are all here together at this time, in this place, in human history. And how much more beautiful do we want than that? You all are so fortunate to be in this lovely Unitarian Universalist community, as we all are, me in Redwood City, all of us here, all of the beautiful music, all of the people working together to create transformation. And it doesn't have to be anything big. The tiniest good thought, you may or may not live to see it, but I can promise you it's there. So I wish you a day and a week and a lifetime ahead of holy curiosity. Blessed be. I didn't ask, and I should have. Do you all need like a minute to hold hands? Do you all do the thing, or do we bless ourselves just like this? So today's benediction comes from the wonderful Irish mystic John O'Donoghue, thinking of those of you who were talking about your Ireland trips over there prior to the service. And he writes, "May you recognize in your life the presence, power, and light of your soul. May you realize that you are never alone, that your soul and its brightness and belonging connects you intimately with the rhythm of the universe. May you have respect for your individuality and difference. May you realize that the shape of your own soul is unique and that you have a special destiny here. That behind the facade of your life, there is something beautiful and eternal happening. Blessed be."